Well, g'day and welcome to another edition of Chewing the Fat. Bevo here. Today we're down at the Hilton Hotel and we're joined by one of South Australia's finest ever jockeys, 1,432 races. She retired almost 12 months ago now. That is Clare Lindop. Clare, great to have you on Chewing the Fat today. Talk to us what you've been up to in the last 12 months.
Hi Bevan, thanks for having me on. 12 months since I've hung up the boots, and my journey out of racing has probably been a bit of a personal development in nature. I've actually been elected into local council in Holdfast Bay, so that's been a really great way to meet people out of the industry and get involved with giving back to the community. And
you're still involved with racing as well?
No, disappointingly a little bit. I think that a lot of sports people do say this when they retire from the industry. I hate to say I got forgotten about, because I've obviously been given some great accolades as well, and I was inducted into the South Australia's Racing Hall of Fame last year. But it's just interesting when you see the South Australian racing industry at the moment. It's a little bit of a, you'd say probably a crisis, and is seeking some government support. And I do feel like I could perhaps support my industry by being an ambassador in some form. And it's disappointing to think that you haven't even been invited back to any of the race days or to be part of that. But a lot of sports people do say that, so I guess I wasn't unaware that this might happen, but it's still slightly disappointing.
Well, if anyone is watching this video from Racing SA, make sure you get this lovely lady involved, because she's got one of the best careers and so many great stories to tell. So get Clare Lindop involved in Racing SA. Now, you've just spoken about Racing SA being in a bit of crisis, and it is quite sad at the moment because there's so much funding going into other sports, but the government just doesn't put any money into racing. Why is that?
Well, the biggest challenge we're facing at the moment is a point of consumption tax, which is a gambling tax. So racing isn't asking for a handout, just need to make that quite clear. But what we are asking for is the government to reinvest the tax which is produced from our industry back into our industry to support jobs and businesses. And I think that all we really want is a bit of security, and for the federal government to have been in power for over 12 months and to not have that assurance or guarantee for an industry or business. You really want to just know some certainty. So I think that's a real major struggle. So, you could be a little bit critical of TRSA, but I do think the government needs to step up and help. The racing industry is a massive supporter of jobs, and I think that, the flow-on effect of our industry is massive.
Yeah, so this 15% tax, it seems a bit ridiculous. Basically, for those people that don't understand how it works, when you put a bet on, 15% tax goes towards what's known as consumption tax. But none of this money is going into the racing. Now, we're the only state in Australia that this is happening. Why is this the case, Clare?
That's a question for Rob Lucas, possibly not for me, and that's a question that our industry is asking, and we're just talking about trying to have a level playing field.
Yeah, it's certainly something that we'll need to discuss further, that's for sure. Rob Lucas, I'll be getting in touch with you. Now let's talk about your career. 1,432 races. You became the first ever female jockey back in 2003 to compete in the Melbourne Cup, and you've actually competed in the most Melbourne Cups of any of Australia's female jockeys. Talk to us about this. This must have been a huge thrill, completing your first Cup back in 2003.
2003 was probably a real career-changing year for me. I'd finished my apprenticeship. I was 22 years old. I finished my apprenticeship probably running 100-odd winners, which is a different kettle of fish to the way the apprentices work this day and age. Normally, apprentices outride their claim and ride a lot of winners, and then they might, as a senior rider, it's a whole new kettle of fish. And for me, I felt like I came into my own when I got opportunities as a senior rider. And 2003 was a year that a lot of hard work and dedication was rewarded with a ride in the Melbourne Cup from Leon McDonald, my biggest supporter of my career, and that started association with his stable for 17 years. And riding the Melbourne Cup for me, I finished 18th, and it was life-changing. I can only imagine what it would be like to win the race.
And in 2008, you won the Victorian Derby aboard Rebel Raider. Now, for those people that don't know, this is one of the most amazing stories, almost like Michelle Payne when she won with Prince of Penzance a few years ago in the Melbourne Cup. 100-to-1 horse Rebel Raider, and you actually got it past the line. How the heck did you do this, Clare?
Rebel Raider is obviously what I'm most known for. My big Group 1 at Victoria. In the Flemington on that big week of Melbourne Cup week to compete on Derby Day, arguably the finest day of racing in the world. Taking that horse, we drew barrier 15. I just knew that I was riding a horse that was a real champion stayer. There was a horse in the race, people might remember Who Got You, that was a favourite. And we went out there thinking, if we make this a genuine staying race and a staying test, we had faith in our horse. And that was the plan. You know, from the get-go, we jumped out, I went back, I got across. I remember slotting in, one out, one back, unbelievably, just as we left the home straight the first time. And next to Dwayne Dunn, another South Australian jockey. He drew barrier 3 and I drew barrier 15. And I remember he looked across at me and said, "How'd you get here, Jock?" And we just had to share that little joke. You know, in a 2,500 metre race, you have a little bit more time to be able to... I think the art of being a good jockey for staying races is to slow down and to really concentrate and actually just pace your horse and take that time. And in such an urgent industry or at the moment, it's quite hard to do. But that was just nice, and I sort of relaxed outside of Dwayne Dunn, and then traditionally on the riverside, as we all have heard, you know, the down the back where everyone takes off at Chiquita Lodge. That's where I actually thought I need to make a move here and make sure that I'm ready to go before Who Got You goes past me, because I thought if he is in front of me, I might not get him, but if he's chasing me, I might be able to outstay him. So that was our plan. And, you know, you always go into a races with plans. It doesn't always come off, but today it worked like clockwork. Coming around the home turn, 600 to go, I peeled out 3 wide, shouldered Who Got You out of the way and went for home with 400 to go. And I can tell you that was the longest 20 seconds of my life. And I hit the front with 100 metres to go and the crowd was roaring. And I, of course, thought that's because Who Got You was challenging. When you watch the replay, he was dropping off and I was sailing for home. But I was just holding my breath to hit the line. And I remember just letting out a big... Actually, it was a little chuckle. Can't believe we pulled this off. My legs went to jelly. And then John Letts is riding across to catch to me and, you know, talking to me, the interview on the pony. And for me, that's what I watched on Saturday racing at home as a kid, watching the jockeys get interviewed after the big races. That for me was living the dream coming true.
So after all those 1,432 career wins, would that be your ultimate favourite, you reckon?
Look, all my wins are special for different reasons, and sometimes it's tougher to win on a horse at a country meeting. You know, for its one ever win, just for those owners, it can be quite tough to get a horse to win any race anywhere. But yeah, the big special win like that, and to do it with Leo McDonald, my biggest supporter, and my mum and dad were actually there on the day as well, and that was a really good moment coming from a family which is not a racing family. To have them there as well as my biggest supporters was a special moment within our family as well as my career.
And let's finish with something that you're very important. You're involved with as an ambassador for Little Heroes. Tell us more about that.
Little Heroes is a fantastic foundation. My interest really started with Chris McDermott and meeting him, and they ran a race day function at the races a few years ago, which I spoke at their luncheon at the races, and then they asked if I'd like to come on board as ambassador, and I was, you know, very delighted to be and honoured to be asked to be involved. And I haven't really been able to do a lot with my racing commitments for Little Heroes over the years, but last year was the first year that actually I spoke for them at their Melbourne Cup function they have every year at the Wine Centre, and I donated a set of the silks that I wore for my last ever career win, tequila time, and it was really nice to be able to give back to them and talk about my career and support a foundation such as Little Heroes, which actually helps sick and injured children with serious illness and their families as well, and so it's fantastic here in South Australia, and it's a great foundation.
Well, Clare Lindop, well done on that, and your amazing career. Thanks so much for joining us today on Chewing the Fat, and let's hope that Racing SA gets in touch with you and gets you on board as they should. Thank you so much. Cheers.